In this lesson, I will show you how to create 3D shapes using the 3D and materials effects in Illustrator. And if you are using any version before 2018, if I'm not mistaken, you might not have all these options here, but you will have this 3D effects, which is now called Classic. So this is the old version. Alright, so in this lesson, I will cover everything here. Okay, now let's go through the basic tools in 3D and materials. So bring out the 3D and materials panel. Over here, we have 4 different 3D types. So the first one is plane. For plane, it's very straightforward. If I have a 2D square shape here and I select plane, you can easily turn this into a 3D shape. You can use this indicator here to change or rotate the object, or you can just use the slider here to rotate the object in X, Y, or Z axis. You can use the presets here to change the angle. So if you have off-axis front, back view, or you want to have isometric, you can use the presets here. So now let's stick with off-axis front. So that's the first one, plane. Now the second one is extrude. Okay, let me get rid of the plane effect. So to get rid of any effects, you can go to the appearance panel and just delete the 3D effects. Okay, let's start over again. Now the second one is extrude. Extrude basically means to increase the thickness or the depth. So let's select this square shape and select extrude. So instantly you can see that there's a depth slider here where you can change the thickness of this square shape. We can turn off the cap to make a hole in the middle. Okay, again, you can rotate the shape like this or use the slider here. Now another thing that I want to show you guys is the bevel option. Bevel means the roundness of the edge. If you look closely here, at this edge, the edge is super sharp. Okay, there's no roundness and all. So if you're trying to make something that looks a little bit realistic, like the edge of a box, the edge of the table, usually there's some sort of roundness in the object. So for that, we need to select bevel. So from here, you can change the size of the bevel, the thickness of the bevel. So you can change the shape. So let's go with round. So you get a rounder and softer bevel like this. Like let's say I want to bevel on this edge here. It's a little bit tricky to get this part to bevel the entire part. So that's one of the limitations that we have to live with it lah. Alright. Here's another example. If I have a shape with a hole in the middle, if I select extrude, same thing, you can create a 3D object using that path. So if you want to create a rounded edge object, what I recommend you to do is to round the object straight away from the shape. So this way you can apply a bevel, select round shape. So this is one of the workaround if you want to bevel every single edges. Alright, just bear in mind you can modify the path. You can also apply the extrude effects onto text. So if you want to create a 3D text, you can easily do that over here. Now that you have learned how to use the extrude function, now let's go to the second tab, materials. In the materials tab, you can assign different materials or shader or texture onto our shape. So by default, so you have all these different materials available for us. So if you want to access to more, you can go to the community and download the texture from there if you have your Adobe account. But for now, I will just stick with the basic one. So let's start with this box here. We can change the value of the metallic and also roughness. And on top of here, there's a graphics tab. So the graphics panel is a new function available for CC 2022. So if you don't see this, then you are not using the latest version of Illustrator. With this graphic panel, we can easily import our logo, our texture, our image onto the graphics panel. And then we can just left click to input the texture that we want. We can scale it like this and we can move it around as we like. So this is very convenient. And if you want to turn off the geometry, you can simply take the invisible geometry and you can still move the shape around. You can still move the texture around. If you have multiple logos or graphics, you can rearrange the layer using the properties panel. Now to add your own artwork into the graphics panel here, Let's create a simple logo. Let's call this logo, and I will create a round shape. Let's give it a color. Let's give it a red color, and then I'll group this together. Control or Command G. You can hold down left click and drag this artwork into the graphics panel. If you select the shape and you left click, and you can apply that artwork or the logo onto the 3D shape. Another way to import your logo into the graphics panel is to open up the symbol panel. So over here, the symbols panel, you can see that the logo is now inside here. So if you want to remove this, you can left click, delete here as well. Okay, but let's delete this from the properties first. Okay, I'll remove this. If you left click and drag into the symbols panel, there will be two options for you to choose, a dynamic symbol or a static symbol. With the dynamic symbol, when you apply, let's say 5 of this shape over here, let's give it a name for now. Okay, let's say I have this logo, and I'll duplicate this multiple times. And if I make changes to either one of this by double clicking it, let's call this logos, and press enter. Okay, you can see each logo will change as well. Compared to a static, if you change this, the rest will not change. So that's the difference between a dynamic or a static symbol. And in the last tab, we have the lighting panel. This is where we can assign different lighting. We can change the lighting position, the intensity of our shape. So it depends on how you want to light your 3D object. You can easily set it over here, customize over here, or you can use the presets. So if you want to have a softer light, you can use the diffuse. You can change the rotation. You can also turn on the shadow option to create a shadow. So let's say I want to create a shadow underneath of the shape. You can change the distance of the shadow, or you can use the rotation to change the direction of the shadow together with the light. The height will affect the shadow as well. And once we're done, if you're happy with just the preview look of this, you can easily just export this shape by going to File, Export Selection, and export out as PNG. So you get the 3D artwork with alpha or transparency. Like this. If you export it out as JPEG, you will not get the transparency like this. Let me show you an example. So let me export out as JPEG. So again, if you export out as JPEG, you will get this white color background because JPEG doesn't support transparency or what we call alpha. Alright, so remember to always export out as PNG if you need to separate the object from the background. If you want to have a nicer render for this 3D object, if you want to have a nicer render image of this 3D shape, you can use the render setting. You can turn on the ray tracing and then set the quality that you want. Okay, I will take the reduce noise. You can render it as a vector, and then we'll click render. So this will take some time. After we have rendered out our shape, the shadow will be nicer, it will be softer, the color will be more realistic. One thing to take note, once you have rendered your shape, this option here will be checked. So remember to untick this, because if not, any changes that you have made, it will keep on rendering and rendering again. So it will like lags out your computer. So turn off real-time rendering when you don't need it anymore. And next, I will show you how to use revolve and inflate. Revolve is very useful to create shapes like cylinder, bottle, glass, or any shape that has a tube shape. So for example, if I want to create this bottle, I have to draw out half of its shape. Okay, let's start with something simple first. Let's say I want to create a simple cylinder. So imagine a simple 3D cylinder. If you look at it from the side and you cut it in half, we will have something like this. So you have to use a stroke or a path, draw a half cylinder like this, and then make sure that this part here, okay, either one side of it, make sure that one side is empty. And when we apply revolve, okay, the first thing that you see is it doesn't look anything like a cylinder. That's because we have to change the offset direction from left to right side, because the open path here is on the right side when we first draw it. Alright, so let me show you how revolve works. So this is the line that we draw, and once you revolve it 360, it will fill the entire shape and form a simple cylinder shape or a tube shape. Now let's look at this bottle here. So same thing, to create this bottle shape, you have to draw half of it. You can draw half of it, and then all you have to do is just apply revolve. And again, make sure you change from left to right. If you want to have a different materials or different colors for each part of it, so let's say if you want to have the cap in another color, the workaround for this is to create separate shapes. Let me show you an example. So over here, I have this simple bottle separated into 3 shapes. So I'll press Ctrl Y or Command Y to go into outline mode. And you can see that each path is a separate path, and each one of it, I apply the same revolve 3D type, and I make sure that each one of this 3D shape has the same rotation value. Because if either one of it is different, then it will not look as if it's one single shape. And the last one, inflate. We can use inflate to make a shape bulge out. For example, I have a round shape here. If I use inflate, one of the side will become rounded like a hemisphere. And if you want both sides to be rounded, then you can tick on inflate both sides. With the settings here, we can change the depth, same like extrude, or you can change how round you want the shape to be. Now let's try out something more interesting with inflate. So over here I have a round shape, and on top of here I have this black color bar. So I'll select both of it, I'll press Ctrl or Command G to group both of them together, and I'll apply inflate. So you can see that it will only bulge out or inflate the part that is not overlapping with the black color bar. So over here I can simply increase the thickness, I can decrease the roundness to create some sort of a peel shape like this. And if you want to change the color of the black color bar, you can just double click on the path again, and then you can change the color to make it nicer like this. And another example here, I have this shape here with a hole in the middle, and now let's create another shape in the middle and fill in the hole. Okay, let's change the color to something brighter. Okay, I'll group both of them together and press inflate, and you'll get this kind of very interesting looking shape as well. And that's it for this lesson. So with the 3D and materials effect, you can create a lot of very interesting looking graphics and also 3D shapes. It just totally depends on how well you understand the tools, how you utilize each function and each tools to create what you want. Here's the last example. So over here I have a simple text. I can simply just extrude the text. I can change it to a direct front view like this, and I can play with the shadow. So let's turn on the shadow. I can increase the length of the shadow. Okay, if the shadow got cropped off from the side, make sure you increase the shadow bound.